So, guys, I do want to talk about Ricky Starks, and I do want to say that, I really think he's one of those wrestlers in AEW that definitely needs a really strong booking, and he's also one of those wrestlers that I do feel that since AEW's dropped the ball on him, he should really consider going to WWE, and obviously with Cody Rhodes being there and being in a really great position, definitely he's one of those people that could honestly be a really big star. Or even if you did something like, say, now you're trying to make Joe Hendry a big deal in WWE, you need to have some NXT people that can actually go over to TNA wrestling and have some good matches and actually, maybe work on their craft a little bit more. So wouldn't that be good for Ricky Starks to actually, through WWE and NXT, actually be on to be on TNA as well, really. But I think like there's a lot of positives that way than negatives. I think that, five positives for staying in AEW is, with how it goes with AEW is that there's a big roster and a lot of people stay home and collect a downside guarantee. So obviously if he wants some easy money and not to really expand upon himself, he's in a good spot. The second thing is that with AEW, you have to be Tony's favorite toy. And what that means is that when Tony really believes in you, he's going to book you. Or also, if you're drawing attention, he's going to keep that momentum. So it's almost like maybe there's a chance for Ricky Starks to actually come back and have a really good run on television. Versus just, what you're seeing right now where he's off of television. He has to kind of like commit to something. He has to do a really great job and be consistent. I think that's easier for him to find a better momentum in AEW versus WWE, where they're going to be like, okay, well, if we have to choose between Ricky Starks and Dominic and Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, we're going to choose the triangle versus Ricky Starks. I also think that the other benefit is that there's a lot of growing room for him because obviously, ROH is a clusterfuck. What would happen if you had Ricky Starks in ROH? What would happen if you made him the ROH champion one day? And, holding on to that belt that's actually a really good title versus the NXT title. It's more prestigious. So, definitely that he could be the AEW champion one day. There's a lot that he could do within AEW. I think the two other things too is that, he does have the mic skills. And I think in AEW, you stand out a lot more. You go more to the top, really, because, as I said, 90% of people on the AEW roster cannot speak on the mic. So, obviously, as I said, that definitely if you utilize his mic skills a lot more and his charisma a lot more, I do think that he's going to have an easier time going to the top in AEW versus WWE. And I think that the last thing that I would say is also, and then the last thing I'll say about staying in AEW is definitely I think there's better job security within that because honestly, if you take Ricky Starks and he does great promos, he has great matches, and he's very charismatic and people are drawn to him, he's going to be in the Swerve Strickland type of role. Definitely when Swerve's contract is up, he's going to ask for more money. Definitely, there's going to be a talk about putting a title on him and definitely giving him a good run, really. And then also, as I said, with the ROH championship, that is a good title to hold because obviously you look at the lineage of wrestlers that have held the ROH title. So for Ricky Starks to kind of get that would be good. But also if you say something like you look at Ricky Starks and you're like, imagine Ricky Starks versus Will Ospreay at a, an all-out show or Ricky Starks versus Jack Perry or Ricky Starks versus Max Caster or something like that. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that can help Ricky Starks be a big draw. There's a lot of great opponents for him. There's a lot of great opponents that can speak at the mic, and if he engages with those people, he can actually go somewhere. Really, I do think that, as I said, it really comes down to Tony's booking, and it also comes down for him to self-advocate. And he also has to do a bit of the Kofi Kingston, New Day type of thing, which is where they went to Vince's office, they said, okay, we got these ideas, and they found the New Day thing, and they worked with it. So he also needs to kind of self-advocate to do really well in AEW and come up with ideas and really just want to go to work, really. I think that all those things will help him, but those are the 5 reasons you stay in AEW. The 5 reasons you should go to NXT is a couple of things. I do think that definitely, I've watched NXT. There's not a lot of wrestlers on that roster that speak on the microphone, really. So if you have somebody like Ricky Starks, you're going to stand out, really. And then also, Ricky Starks has a lot of good charisma. You look at somebody like Trick Williams. What's going to happen when Trick Williams goes to the main roster and he has that whoop that trick thing, and you hear the whole audience cheer that? What would happen if they put him in the Royal Rumble and you have, you know, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 people chanting whoop that trick? What's going to happen to Trick Williams? He's going to be a megastar. What's going to happen if we put him in the Money in the Bank? Trick Williams is going to pop, really. And what would happen if that was Ricky Starks, where, he has really good music, he has really good pyro, and he can talk to the microphone? What's going to happen to him is he's going to stand out in NXT, and then they're going to be like, okay, we'll put him in the Royal Rumble. You see him get a pop, and then you may be like, okay, put him in Money in the Bank if you want to have a paper champion or something like that for a while, really. There's a lot of just, with Ricky Starks, there is a sense of him he's going to stand out a lot in NXT because he has the mic skills, and that charisma, that momentum can transfer to bigger things. And then I think the next thing that I would say is Money in the Bank and the Royal Rumble. Because, if you have a very charismatic wrestler, what did I say about Trick Williams? You put Ricky Starks in that role. If he was very charismatic and he's getting over, put him in the Royal Rumble, what's going to happen? You put Jade Cargill in the Royal Rumble, what happened? You put AJ Styles in the Royal Rumble, what happened? You put these wrestlers that have a lot of charisma on outside of WWE. They go to WWE. They appear at the Rumble. You're going to see their momentum. You're going to see their reaction, and the reaction's usually good. And then you do it with Ricky Starks. That's good. What would happen if you're like, okay, he's doing such a great job in NXT. Let's put him in the Money in the Bank, and then he wins that. He beats Cody or another wrestler, and he gets that, because there's one big benefit of Money in the Bank. It helps wrestlers jump the line, really, to the championship spot, really. So I think that's better versus like AEW, where I think to be the AEW champion, it's definitely very, very hard. I think to be the AEW champion, it's a mix of, backstage politics. And usually their pattern of champions have been people who really just, it's been Tony's choice, but it's also been people who want to drop the title. And it's also been people who want to not be the champion because of injury and other things like that. So it may be hard to win the AEW championship. And then it also goes down to what I've said about the ROH championship. I do think that they need more contenders for the ROH championship and make that a very competitive title. But you run into the Athena problem with the ROH championship, where you may just give it to Mark Briscoe for like 300, 400 days, maybe almost 2 years. And then if that's your pattern, really, what's going to happen to a person like Ricky Starks, who could go to ROH, have great matches, make that show a draw, and then you're like, okay, we're not going to make you the champion, really. So maybe in WWE they can be like, okay, we can kind of hotshot him if he has the momentum, versus AEW, where they may not provide that for him, or they may be like, okay. As people said, I think there's going to be two things that happen this year. It's either going to be Bryan Danielson, the next champion, or it's going to be Will Ospreay. But if you have Ricky Starks come back and he has a lot of momentum and a lot of grind, he may not be in that talk for AEW, her next AEW champion, really. So I think maybe within WWE he may have more chances to be a champion. I do think that the other thing too is that people say that he sounds like The Rock. So what would happen if you had a Rock and Ricky Starks segment? What would happen if they actually had a promo together? Ricky Starks, and The Rock rehearsed it, and it was a way for Ricky Starks to kind of one-up him at sometimes. And that would be good because you're putting over a new star, really. So that could also help him too. I think that's also the big thing I see with AEW and also WWE, is that I think that WWE knows how to create new stars. It's really just their choice to push stars and not push stars. When it was during Vince, that was a philosophy. He could make new stars, but he picked and choose. In AEW, they do not know how to make stars. But what they know how to do is that when people rise to the occasion, they become stars. You look at somebody like MJF. I think if MJF was not assertive, he would not be in the position that he is, because Tony would not realize it. Other people may realize it, and other people would advocate for MJF. But if MJF did not have the assertiveness, he would not be in the spot that he's in. But in WWE, they may be like, okay, this guy has something. We're gonna have like, there's gonna be a bunch of agents and other people acting like lawyers for him to advocate for him. But but definitely, as I've said, that definitely if you want him, if you want Ricky Starks to be a champion, if you want Ricky Starks to go somewhere, and be very successful, I do think that it's that WWE would is at the point right now where they want to make new stars and they want to kind of make sure it is a roster where you want to see everybody really. So I think that with Ricky Starks having momentum and if he wants to really grind, I think that that's going to be the best thing for him. The next thing that I'm going to say with Ricky Starks in WWE is that they would not make him a jobber. And I've talked about Konosuke Takeshita, the Don Callis family, Powerhouse Hobbs, Ricky Starks, and there's a lot of wrestlers that are really, really good in AEW, but they always lose the plot. And, I mean, they're plot armor wrestlers, you know. So if Tony wants somebody to win, they're going to win. Really, Takeshita is never going to beat Bryan Danielson. Takeshita is never going to beat Jon Moxley. Takeshita is never going to like win the AEW championship because of that plot armor thing, and that happens with AEW. You see that with a lot of different wrestlers, and Ricky Starks falls into that. So there could be a situation where he may have the momentum, may have the charisma, and Tony just doesn't know how to book him well, or be like, okay, you know what, you need to have a match with a Bryan Danielson, and you need to actually beat Bryan Danielson this time, and you need to do it clean because we need to build a new star. What would happen if Bryan Danielson says, no, he pulls a Hulk Hogan and says, that doesn't work for me, brother. You don't really have a lot of that in AEW. You have a lot of that in AEW where you may have somebody in a certain role. Like you look at Big Cass and Ricky Starks as tag team champions. What was their role? Their role was to be transitional champions and give the title for Sting and Darby Allin. What would happen if Ricky Starks and Big Cass were really hot, and then you said something like, you know what, instead of the Young Bucks, the draw is Big Bill or Big Cass, whatever his name is, and Ricky Starks? I think that they would be, no, we're not actually going to have Sting and Darby versus the Young Bucks instead, really, because you know like how backstage politics is in AEW. I think in WWE they'll be more willing to kind of be like, okay, we see this momentum, we see what Ricky Starks can do. We want to take him out of this, you know, jobber type of role, really. I think that WWE is really smart to say, okay, we know which wrestlers should not be jobbers, and sometimes they screw the pooch with it, like Sami Zayn versus Braun Breaker. But there are times in WWE where I think you have a higher chance of them being like, oh, if somebody has something, we're actually going to let them actually win the big one, really. And I think the last thing that I would say is that it's just more exposure. Like, as I said, like Rick Starks is a name, but he's not like a household name or anything like that, really. You know, what would happen if he has a lot of charisma and he gets really over? What would happen if you said something like maybe after Adam Pearce or whoever's managing SmackDown, you have Ricky Starks do it? Because, you know, he does have the charisma, he does have a really great look. He could be a manager, or, you know, as I said, he could kind of like, you know, be that wrestler that's a really great like heel and everything like that, really. So I do feel that with Ricky Starks, you know, definitely he's very underutilized. I do think that if I was to weigh it in, you know, I don't think that with AEW he's going to get that much further. I think it's time for him to go to NXT, and I think, you know, they want to put him on the main roster for a while, give him like 6 months or a year, you see what happens. Really, I think that would be good. Or, you know, I don't recommend this. He could go to TNA Wrestling, but as I said, TNA Wrestling doesn't have that much exposure, really. But I do think that, honestly, you know, Ricky Starks, he has a lot of potential. He has great mic skills, but he's underutilized, and he can do a lot more than being in tag teams or just being up and down the roster, really. He really needs to come back, and he really needs to deliver. And I think that if AEW is not giving him the right opportunities, because I think they wanted to do Big Bill versus Ricky Starks, but Ricky Starks didn't want to do that. But I do think that, you know what, if they're not giving him the feuds, they're not giving him the opponents, and not like a pathway to kind of be somebody big, it's time to go, really. You know, it really is time for him to go.